Welcome to On the Vineyard, a weekly podcast from the Vineyard Gazette Media Group on Martha's Vineyard. I'm Gazette senior writer Louisa Huffstadter. On the Vineyard is sponsored by Crane Appliance. Coming up on the show, we'll hear from Gazette Editor-in-Chief Bill Evell, Managing Editor Ethan Genter, and reporter Gwen Skiles about the top stories in this week's newspaper, including housing for middle-income islanders and Morning Glory Farm's 50th anniversary. We'll also speak with Susie Middleton, editor of The Vine and Cook the Vineyard, about some good things to read, hear, and eat. That's all just ahead. Taking a look at the island's theater scene, a psychedelic production of Shakespeare's The Tempest is playing at the Tisbury Amphitheater through August 10th, and a play called Chillmark about the Vineyard's historic deaf community is running through August 16th at the Martha's Vineyard Playhouse, which is producing both shows. You can find out more in our all-island events calendar online at calendar.vineyardgazette.com. That's the sound of our vintage printing press turning out the Vineyard Gazette's biggest issue of the year. Editor-in-Chief Bill Evell is here to tell us about what's in the newspaper this week.
Turning now to one of those stories, Ethan Genter reported on the so-called missing middle. These are the people here who make too much for affordable housing, but still not nearly enough to afford a home on the vineyard. This segment of the population is growing, and some housing advocates have turned their attentions to helping this important part of the community. Ethan?
Good morning, Bill. We talked to several people kind of involved in the efforts around this group, people who kind of caught in this tide. And what we found is, even people who are making comfortable salaries, sometimes six figures, still can't make a living here on the vineyard, which is really concerning to town officials, businesses. People worried not only is it hard for low-income people, but people who make largely considered good salaries might not be able to make a living here.
Yeah, it's no secret or not news to anybody that there's a huge housing crisis and there's been a great push for affordable housing, but now there's this other push. And some of the numbers you saw, like the gap between someone making six figures and still trying to get a house here, I mean, the number gap is huge.
Yeah, so we looked at, there's the Martha's Vineyard Commission did a report last year that stated, for someone making 150% of the area median income, which is about $170,000, which is well over what's considerable affordable housing is at 80% of the area median income. And so they found, here on the island, it's several $100,000 between what those people can afford and the median price of a house here. And in Aquina, I believe the gap was like 1.1 million between what they could afford and what they could buy. So this isn't really a bootstrap situation, work a few more hours, work a side job. There's not really much overcoming that.
And then, of course, that can hollow out the community. You talk to Oak Bluffs Police Department and, what's happening and what they see down the pike of maybe having a police force that's potentially all off island.
Yeah, this is a concern that they've had. This isn't a reality yet, but they're looking at a new police station and they're saying we should probably have bunk rooms in here for officers who need to stay the night because they couldn't make it to the mainland or their shifts early in the morning before the boat. So this is something that everyone's thinking about. There are strategies that housing advocates are taking right now. There are projects that are targeting this different income bracket, but people are kind of caught in the tide because, like we said, right now the structure of affordable housing isn't really built to get these people because in most places that income is more than enough to kind of have you set.
Yeah, and so there's some developments, but as you said, there's some constraints there. But there's also some things that the towns are working on, maybe some other unique possibilities that they're looking into.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that has been done in other places, in places like Vail and Aspen and kind of the ski area of the western U.S., they purchase year-round deed restrictions on homes. It's similar to, if a town buys a conservation property, that land can only be used for conservation. They buy restrictions on homes, and that home can only be used for year-round housing. And that kind of opens up more possibilities for people in this income bracket. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways that people are looking at it, but there's not a ton of answers to help these people right now.
All right. Thank you so much, Ethan, and we look forward to more reporting on this important subject.
Thank you, Bill.
Turning now to Gwen Skiles, who wrote a story about a big birthday this summer. Morning Glory Farm began 50 years ago. It is run by the Athern family, and it is an essential stop for many islanders and visitors alike. Gwen got to sit down with the Atherns and talk to them about the early days and the days to come. Gwen?
Hi, Bill. Yes, I was so excited to work on this story. Morning Glory is such a staple in our community. And I sat down with each of the Atherns that work on the farm right outside in that porch area. And it was just great hearing all the history.
Yeah, now Jim and Debbie Athern, they're the matriarch and the patriarch. And at first, you reported like Jim didn't think farming was in his future.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that too. The Athern's name goes back several generations. And so I always kind of assumed farming was in the picture for a while. But he barely had any farming experience before he started. He had always thought, ooh, what if I was a farmer? And then one day, David Flanders, who kind of ran his own operation in Chilmark, asked him to help out. And so that was kind of the stepping stone to what Morning Glory is today.
Yeah, and that is also a through line. They have their kids are working on it, particularly Simon and Dan, their boys, and they didn't think they were going to become farmers either, but now they are running the farm in this next generation.
Yeah, that's also funny. Simon was working and making pastries in Seattle and Montana, and then Dan Athern, he was kind of more focused on aquaculture, but as they said, the Vineyard siren song kept calling, and they were beckoned home.
Yeah, and both their wives are involved too.
Yes, it is a massive family operation. Robin Athern, she runs Morning Glory Flowers, and that property is in West Tisbury, and there's over 150 different varieties of stems that she grows. And Meg Athern also helps out on the farm, working in the main operations, and they also have property in Chilmark where some of their cattle is.
And I like the way they talked about they've got their family. It's a family business, but it's a community that keeps growing every year because they hire so many young people who then get bitten by the farm bug too.
Oh, yeah. They call it their farmily because there's just so many young people that come each year and help out, and they get really close in the process. Food is good for the soul, and so is agriculture.
All right. Thanks so much, Gwen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, Ethan, and Gwen. Joining me now is Susie Middleton, editor of Cook the Vineyard and The Vine. What's in The Vine this month, Susie?
I love the August issue. It's a real tribute to the talent that we have on this island, both in Islanders and off-Islanders. We've got a great story on Johnny Hoy and the Bluefish by John Kennedy. Takes a look at the talented musicians in the band, as well as the incredibly rich talent we have throughout the island musically. We have a story on Black Joy Kitchen, which is a great new restaurant in Oak Bluffs. Chef Ting is cooking the flavors of the Black diaspora and also building a real community there. We have a story on the two guys who have been the caretakers of the East Chop Light for 20 years, and that's a lot of fun.
Cook the Vineyard this week?
Cook the Vineyard this week is all about peaches. We have a peachy puffy pancake, peach cobbler, peach galette, and peach salsas.
Cook the Vineyard editor Susie Middleton is also the author of the Fast, Fresh, and Green cookbook series. Staying on the topic of things to eat, here's a little bit about Martha's Vineyard clam bakes from the late Francie Conlon of Hearthaven in Oak Bluffs.
We always had a clam bake. Ever since I remember, we had clam bakes. Most of our clam bakes when I was young. Howard Hart had a huge catboat. I think it was a catboat. It was the biggest thing I ever saw. And they would go over, and we went sometimes, would go over to Chappie, to Cape Pogue. And then they would dig sand up and put the seaweed in and put the rocks in and then the seaweed and build a fire and get the rocks hot and all that. And they'd bring the lobsters, bring the clams, bring everything, bring the tables, sawhorses for the long boards. I mean, the excursions were just unbelievable. But fun? Oh, it was so much fun. But we just spend the day. We'd come back late afternoon. Everybody helped. Everybody worked. We probably dug the clams. We really had a wonderful childhood. It was just amazing luck. I mean, we all say that all the time now. We were all just clueless as how lucky we were.
Thank you to the Martha's Vineyard Museum for this audio recorded by Lindsay Lee. Francie Conlon died in the summer of 2020, one day before her 101st birthday. Our theme music is from Islander Michael Hayden, known to millions as the guitarist in the opening scene of Jaws. This week's podcast was edited by Margaret Evans. If you like our show, please follow us so you won't miss an episode, and tell a friend who loves the Vineyard. Thanks to our sponsor, Crane Appliance. Their appliance experts listen to your needs and help you choose the right appliances for your home. Crane Appliance, they call the Cape and Islands home. I'm Louisa Huffstadter. Monica Brady-Meyerhoff will be back next week. Thanks for joining us on the Vineyard.